So as Pippa said, we're here today to sort of talk about how the built environment sector can meet the challenges ahead. And I'm going to be talking about the role of data in all of that. So sort of data-informed decision-making, but also the systems thinking that's needed for our built environment. I'm going to start on that systems thinking viewpoint. So I think it's crucial that we remember that infrastructure, and when I say infrastructure, I'm including our buildings and all of the infrastructures that supply them, be that transport, energy, water, ICT, and so on. So our infrastructure is very much a system of systems. All of these things actually operate together. They can't be completely separated out from each other. And because they interact with each other, they also they support each other. And the other thing to remember is that they've been built over 200 or more years, and they haven't actually been designed as a system of systems. They've kind of ended up that way. Looking ahead, obviously, we might choose to design them as a system of systems. Because they've been built up over 200 years, and most of these, certainly in countries like the UK, most of the things that we built 200 years ago are still in operation and are not being decommissioned, we effectively need to think that we need to maintain our infrastructure indefinitely. And each year in the UK, by value, we only add 0.5% to this complex system of systems. So often in engineering terms, we think about the new things and how can we instrument the new things and get data about them. But actually the new things are only a very, very small part of the story. So we have to think about how do we learn more about the whole of that system. I think the other thing to recognise is that infrastructure is a system of services. Infrastructure is what makes life in our cities and towns livable. And supports our domestic, economic and leisure activities. And it creates social, economic and environmental outcomes that result in a system for human flourishing if we do it right. So a lot of our sustainable development goals are in one way or another tied up with the provision of infrastructure and good infrastructure. So this is relevant wherever we are in the world. So coming on to then the role of data, increasingly our infrastructure is becoming what we call a cyber-physical system. So we are able to generate more and more data about these physical assets that we have. And in generating that data, we then analyze the data and use that data to create information that can then inform the decisions that we make about either an individual asset or a system of assets like a railway, or indeed, you know, a complex system of systems like the sort of infrastructure that's serving our cities. And all of this can help us make much better decisions. The more we know about a problem, the better the decisions are that we can make. And it helps us to reduce uncertainty as well in our decision-making processes. So increasingly what we're doing is creating these things, you know, the current buzzword is the digital twin. Those of the audience who are engineers will also be familiar with building information modeling, BIM, which is sort of, you know, the baby brother of digital twins. Digital twins aren't a mystery. All they are is a way of curating our data. That data curation is the really important thing. And if we have good data, then as I said, we can make better decisions. We can make better decisions about our design processes. We can make better decisions in our construction processes. We can make them more efficient. We can manage and operate our existing infrastructure better. And we can understand what our infrastructure needs are for our cities, what new infrastructure we might need to support our cities, how we might need to get more out of our existing infrastructure. All of this sort of underpinned by data helps with this data-driven approach, both to decision-making and importantly to policy-making. So the opportunity around this really is, you know, as Lord Kelvin said back in, I think, 1870, if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. If we don't know what the real performance of our infrastructure is, how can we make that performance better? How can we support a flourishing system for our human occupants of our built environment if we don't actually understand well how these things are performing? So the more data we have, the more we can learn from this real performance to change the way that we do design, deliver, operate and maintain our infrastructure. And an important part of that going forward is digital twins, artificial intelligence, machine learning and so forth, because we can now generate so much data that the traditional engineering approaches to data analysis can't keep up anymore. So we need to use these modern new tools. In doing that, we reduce uncertainty, and that helps us to create smart infrastructure solutions that deliver smarter, more resilient cities. And crucially, in the context of today on Earth Day, it helps us to meet the challenges of resource scarcity, zero carbon, and this need for resilient infrastructure. I'm very briefly, I normally spend a lot longer on this slide, but the one thing I'm going to say is that data curation is crucial. It's no good generating a lot of data if we don't look after it well and store it in a way that it can be accessed in the future to inform our decision making. But the crucial thing here today is about carbon. There's an awful lot on this slide. The key takeaways are carbon dioxide persists in the atmosphere for 100 to 200 years. So every kilo of carbon we emit today will be there for the next 100 to 200 years. So we need to save as much carbon as possible, as early as possible. And in order to do that, we've got to make the most of our existing technologies that we can, and our existing data and our existing approaches. We've got to digitalize the data that we use on construction sites in order that we can better control and manage our construction sites. We've got to digitalize the data that we have about our infrastructure assets so that we know what their condition is and we can get more out of them. We need to decide what we need to build. So do we need to build something, or is there another solution? Do we need to build as much? What should we be building with, and how can we optimize the design and reduce construction waste? Now, I'm not going to go into that in detail because colleagues later on will be talking about that. What I would like to draw your attention to, though, is this need again to take a whole life perspective. So how long will an asset be used for? Is it worth embodying carbon now and emitting carbon now to extend the life? Or actually, are we better off doing something lighter weight, as it were, and then thinking about how we're going to address carbon emissions later by, for example, moving to zero carbon energy systems? And one crucial thing that we have to do through all of this is measure, 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 measure. Calculate and optimize carbon in the design, calibrate our design models against real performance, control processes on construction sites, use standards like PAS 2080, monitor and manage what we do, innovate, go back and measure again. And one of the things that's going to help us with that is this new carbon reduction code, which we've been developing at CSIC in collaboration with the Construction Leadership Council. It's going to form part of the Construction Leadership Council's Construct Zero initiative. It's not intended to replace existing standards. What it does do is enable clients and the supply chain to make a commitment to carbon reduction. Sorry, so I'm just going to go back one. We are launching it on the 17th of June. And if you want to see the code, there's going to be a link put in the chat shortly. There is a link there that takes you to the page on the CSIC website, which tells you all about the code, who's been involved in developing it. They're all from industry. I think crucially, it's worth noting that it's currently being trialled and evaluated by the Environment Agency, one of the big HS2 contracts, and the National Association of Construction Frameworks, who are all very much behind its adoption and implementation. So in summary, we need to deploy sort of smart infrastructure solutions to provide data for decision-making through the whole life of our infrastructure assets. That whole life view is critical for managing carbon. We need to remember that it's not just about the new stuff, it's very much about the existing stuff. We need to manage our data and we must act now.